Pontius Pilate is remembered as a man of power, influence, but also of weakness and indecision. In 33 AD, during the Passover festival, Pilate had to deal with the case of Jesus, a Jewish preacher whom the Jewish leaders accused of blasphemy and sedition. The Jewish leaders wanted Pilate to execute Jesus, but Pilate found no fault in him and tried to release him. He even tried to appease the violent crowd by releasing Barrabas, a most feared and notorious criminal of the era. But the people strongly revolted against this, insisting they wanted Jesus to be crucified. But who is this Pilate? How did he rise to power? Why did he wash his hands and allow Jesus to be crucified? What are the consequences of this man's wrong choices? How did he die? Stick around to find out. Pontius Pilate was a Roman knight of the Samnite clan of the Pontii who rose to prominence through the patronage of Sejanus, a powerful official in the court of Emperor Tiberius. Sejanus helped Pilate secure the position of prefect or governor of Judea, a province of the Roman Empire, in 26 AD. Pilate was responsible for maintaining law and order, collecting taxes, administering justice in Judea, and appointing the high priests of the Jewish temple. There is a possible inference that Matthew, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus, worked under Pilate as a tax collector. The Gospels of Matthew and Mark identify Matthew as a tax collector, also called Levi, who was sitting at the tax booth when Jesus called him to follow him. The Gospel of Luke also mentions a tax collector, Levi, who invited Jesus to a banquet at his house, but does not explicitly identify him as an apostle. Tax collectors in Judea were agents of the Roman Empire, who collected duties on imported goods and tolls on roads and bridges. They were often despised by the Jews, who considered them traitors and extortionists. Tax collectors were divided into two categories: publicans, whom the Roman government contracted to collect taxes in a specific area, and portatores, whom the publicans employed to collect taxes at specific locations. It is possible that Matthew was a portatore who worked at a tax booth in Capernaum, a town on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. If so, he would have been under the authority of a publican, who would have been accountable to the Roman prefect of Judea, Pilate. Before we continue, let's take a cursory look at the Roman Empire and how vast it was in the dawn of civilization. The Roman Empire was founded when Augustus Caesar proclaimed himself the first emperor of Rome in 31 BC, after defeating his rivals Mark Antony and Cleopatra in the civil war that followed the assassination of Julius Caesar. Augustus initiated a period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, which lasted over 2 centuries. Under the rule of Trajan, the Roman Empire reached its greatest extent in AD 117, when it covered about 5 million square kilometers, stretching from Britain to Egypt and from Spain to Mesopotamia. The empire was divided into provinces, each governed by a representative of the emperor, and had a complex network of roads, aqueducts, and monuments. This is where consuls or governors were appointed over each province. Thus, our main character, Pilate, came into being. Pilate was reluctant to condemn Jesus, but he also feared a riot from the crowd and a backlash from the emperor if he failed to uphold Roman law. He tried to appease the public by having Jesus flogged, but they demanded his crucifixion. Pilate then washed his hands in front of the crowd, symbolically declaring that he was innocent of Jesus' blood, and handed him over to be crucified. His personality is often interpreted in different ways by the Synoptic Gospels. The Synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke share a common source and perspective, unlike the Gospel of John, which has a different style and content. The Synoptic Gospels similarly present Pilate, but with some variations and emphases. In general, they depict Pilate as a weak and vacillating ruler who was more concerned with pleasing the crowd and avoiding trouble than delivering justice. They also portray Pilate as being impressed by Jesus and reluctant to condemn him, but ultimately yielding to the pressure of the Jewish leaders and the mob. The Synoptic Gospels also portray the significance of Pilate's wife and her dream about Jesus the night before Jesus' trial. Pilate's wife's dream was a warning from God that Jesus was innocent and that Pilate should have nothing to do with him. Some Christian traditions interpret her dream as a sign of her conversion to Christianity and her intercession for Jesus. They also believe her dream profoundly impacted Pilate's decision to wash his hands off the trial, but not without giving Jesus a rash slap on the face, possibly to appease the crowd. Pilate's washing of his hands was a symbolic gesture of disclaiming responsibility for Jesus' death and transferring the guilt to the Jewish leaders and the crowd. However, this act did not absolve Pilate from his moral culpability, as he still gave the order to crucify Jesus against his conscience. But this event would have profound consequences on Pilate's life several years later, after the death and resurrection of Christ. This is where Pilate's downfall began. In 36 AD, Pilate ordered his troops to attack a group of Samaritans who had gathered at Mount Gerizim, believing their their Messiah would reveal sacred vessels buried there by Moses. Pilate's soldiers killed many of the Samaritans, and the survivors appealed to Vitellius, the legate of Syria, accusing Pilate of murder. What happens next would mark a significant anticlimax of one of the most potent consuls in the Roman Empire. Pilate was overthrown from power by the combined complaints of the Jews and the Samaritans, who accused him of cruelty, oppression, and injustice. His violent suppression of the Samaritan movement was the last straw that led to his recall by Vitellius. Pilate had alienated both the Jewish and the Samaritan populations by his disregard for their religious sensitivities and his excessive use of force. Shortly after this, Vitellius ordered Pilate to return to Rome and face trial before Tiberius Caesar, who had appointed him as prefect of Judea. However, before Pilate reached Rome, Tiberius died in 37 AD. This was the same year that Caiaphas was demoted. He is known as the Jewish high priest who presided over the Sanhedrin trial of Jesus and delivered him to Pilate for crucifixion. He was also the son-in-law of Annas, a former high priest who wielded much influence over Jewish affairs. Want to know more about Annas? Then be sure to check out our video on what became of him after the death of Jesus. In 37 AD, after the death of Tiberius, Vitellius deposed Caiaphas from his office and appointed Jonathan, the son of Annas, as the new high priest. However, not much is known about the fate of Caiaphas after his removal from power. Shortly after Tiberius's death, another emperor by the name of Caesar succeeded him. Caesar was his grandnephew Caligula, whose full name was Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus. He ruled from 37 to 41 AD and is widely regarded as one of the most tyrannical and insane emperors in Roman history. He is infamous for his cruelty, extravagance, megalomania, and sexual perversion. He executed or exiled many of his relatives, friends, and political opponents, often on trivial or fabricated charges. But before I veer off too far, let's get back to what happened to our anti-hero Pilate. Pilate was sent into exile by Vitellius, the governor of Syria, who was superior to Pilate in rank and authority. Vitellius ordered Pilate to return to Rome and face trial before the emperor for violently suppressing a Samaritan uprising at Mount Gerizim in 36 AD. It is believed that the region where Pilate was exiled is not certain, though some sources suggest that it was Gaul, corresponding to modern-day France and parts of Belgium, Germany, and Italy. What later happened to Pilate is perhaps one of the sad tales many would weep, asking, "How art the mighty fallen?" Shortly after Pilate's exile, he did what would never have been expected from a high-ranking official like himself. He committed suicide, either by his own choice or by the order of Caligula. One possible reason for his suicide was his despair and guilt over his role in the crucifixion of Jesus, as some traditions suggest that he became a Christian or a sympathizer of Christianity. Another possible reason was his fear and shame of facing the wrath and judgment of Caligula, who was notorious for his cruelty and caprice. According to some sources, after Pilate was exiled and before his suicide, he became a Christian and was considered a martyr and canonized. His wife, whose name Claudia Procula is unknown, is also said to have converted to Christianity and is venerated as a saint by some churches. Beloved, let us learn from the tragic things that'll happen to those who oppose God's truth in any way. As Romans 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." This verse signifies that God can use even the most evil and wicked actions of humans, such as the crucifixion of Jesus, to accomplish his good and perfect will, which is the salvation of those who love him and follow his calling. God is sovereign and powerful. Nothing can thwart his plan or love for his people. He can turn the worst situations into the best outcomes for his glory and our good. Let me know if you enjoyed this story in the comments section below. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notification bell to keep getting more videos like this. Thanks for staying rooted till now.